It's pretty normal for running shoe brands to have very different product lines, which are dedicated towards different styles of training, or maybe just give you a different experience on foot. And On is one of those brands. Today, we're going to discuss two shoes in the Cloudsurfer line, the Cloudsurfer 2 and the Cloudsurfer Next, so that you can hopefully decide which one is best for you. What's up, everybody? I'm Eric McIntyre, aka Rad Dad Bod, and you're watching Rad Dad Bod TV, where we review running shoes. Now, like I said, today we're going to be comparing the Cloudsurfer 2 with the Cloudsurfer Next. And if it's your first time watching one of my videos, you may notice some timestamps below, so feel free to jump around to the various parts of this comparison, but if you do so, I would sure appreciate if you come back and watch the full thing when you get a second, as I put a lot of time and effort into these videos. And if you've been a viewer for a while, but you're not yet subscribed, I would sure appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button and even turn on notifications so you get notified every time I drop a new video, which in 2025 has pretty much been daily, weekday videos. And just to start us off, let's talk about some disclaimers and disclosures for these two shoes. I was provided both of these shoes directly from On for the purpose of review. That being said, I was not paid and I'm not given any talking points, scripts, anything like that. These videos are not part of any campaigns and I'm not asked to include the shoes in any additional content videos or anything of the sort. In fact, no one watches or approves my content beforehand. All thoughts are entirely my own. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about the intended use of these two shoes. So both of these shoes, in my opinion, are basically lightweight trainers. Now, there are some differences that we'll break down between the two shoes just in terms of overall experience, but for the most part, these shoes are both used for daily miles, easy runs, recovery runs, maybe even the occasional long run, but really it's supposed to be kind of a daily use, just kind of workhorse style shoe. Now, from a price perspective, the Cloudsurfer 2 comes in at $160 and the Cloudsurfer Next comes in at $150. So really, they're pretty close in price, so I do think that at least from a budget perspective, you're just going to want to go with the one that you feel like suits your foot best, because there's not going to be a huge cost difference there. Now, from a specs perspective, the Cloudsurfer 2 comes in at 9 ounces and 255 grams. Meanwhile, the Cloudsurfer Next comes in at 9.4 ounces and 266 grams. Moving to the stack height, the Cloudsurfer 2 comes in at 37 in the heel and 28 in the forefoot for a 9mm heel to toe drop. And the Surfer Next comes in at 37 in the heel and 31 in the forefoot for a 6mm heel to toe drop. That's going to be one of the more noticeable differences between the two shoes. While having the same amount of stack in the heel, the drop is pretty significantly different by 3mm. So you have the 6mm on the Next, which might be a little more versatile for a variety of foot strikes. Meanwhile, the Surfer 2 might be a little bit more comfortable for your classical forefoot strikers. Now, from a fit perspective, the Cloudsurfer 2 fits a little bit more like a standard running shoe. It is a little bit more snug in the forefoot. You have kind of a standard heel, and then I would say that it has a decent room in the toe box. But for an On shoe, it's the best fitting shoe for me, but On tends to fit very wide. So this is going to fit differently than any On model that I've tried before. From a length perspective, both are true to size, so I wouldn't size up or size down. And then with the Cloudsurfer Next, I do find the fit to be wide fitting overall, or at the very least accommodating. It's not so wide that I was like swimming in the shoe by any means, but I did have to make sure that I was cinching down pretty good with the laces to make sure that I was getting some good lockdown, because it does fit wider overall, and like I said, very wide foot friendly. Now, moving to the uppers, the Cloudsurfer 2 has a engineered mesh, which is 88% recycled polyester. You're going to have a couple of really nice elements here. So the heel itself is very, very cushioned while still maintaining a good structure, which gives you some really, really good heel lockdown there without any like rigid or anything that's going to be really like rubbing into your ankle or Achilles. You have a mid to heavyweight tongue, which is really, really nice. It does maybe prevent you a little bit from getting a tighter lockdown, but at the same time, as you cinch down the shoe, that hug kind of wraps around your foot and keeps it locked in place. So that's really, really nice. I find that the shoe has really, really solid lockdown. Overall, it's a nice, comfortable upper without being overwhelming. So it's not like crazy, crazy hot, but I do suspect that it will be somewhat warm in the summer months. So something to consider just as the temperatures start to heat up. Moving to the Cloudsurfer Next, you have an engineered woven upper, which has 24% recycled material. The shoe also has a fairly cushioned tongue, I would say mid to heavyweight tongue right there. And then in the heel, you have a little bit less cushion and a little bit more rigidity or structure there, but it's still a fairly comfortable upper. I think personally, I prefer the Cloudsurfer 2 upper from a comfort perspective though. The tongue is fully gusseted, and so you do get some good lockdown in this shoe as well. Despite being wide, I did feel like I could still get my fit, and I didn't slip and slide around in the shoe, but I did find that this woven upper was a little bit warm, and I did test this during some summer months, so I'm not sure which one's going to be hotter better overall. With that, the Surfer 2 does seem like it is built to be a little bit more breathable though, so also something to consider when it comes to the uppers of the shoes. From a midsole perspective, you have CloudTech Phase with a Helion foam, and Helion is just a EVA and OBC compound or blend. I found that the foam was soft yet supportive. It's not going to be squishy, but it's also not going to be like the most responsive foam underfoot. And the key here to the midsole for the Cloudsurfer 2, in my opinion, is that they used the finite element analysis, basically computer analysis, to decide how they would do the angle of the clouds in the midsole. So that's actually one of the bigger changes that you can kind of see there, that with the Cloudsurfer Next, you have more angled clouds that kind of collapse along the way, versus with the Cloudsurfer 2, you can see that they kind of flatten out there in the forefoot. And what's interesting to me is that I didn't feel like I had like crazy overall ground feel in the forefoot, despite having 3 millimeters less of foam in the forefoot for the Cloudsurfer 2, versus in the Cloudsurfer Next, I did find that the foam felt very, very firm overall, despite having more foam in that forefoot like we just talked about. So both these midsoles are actually the same compound from my understanding. It's really just kind of the angle of the clouds that has changed, as well as the overall stack in the forefoot. I find that the Cloudsurfer 2 is just a lot more forgiving. It's soft yet supportive. It's not overly firm though. Versus with the Cloudsurfer Next, I did find that the shoe was really, really firm, and I didn't feel like I could get much pickup in it either. And so maybe because there is additional ground feel or additional ground contact with the Surfer 2, you're able to pop off the ground a little bit more. Maybe because you have a more aggressive, drop with the 9 millimeters, so you're more on your toes compared to the Surfer Next. But I prefer personally the feel of the midsole of the Cloudsurfer 2. And again, I'm not sure if they changed the compound from a like firmness perspective at all, but I just found that the Cloudsurfer Next foam didn't quite pop for me. Now moving to the outsoles, the Cloudsurfer 2 here on the top uses that same finite element analysis or computer analysis to create an optimized grip pattern. And I will say that both of these have the same grip compound underfoot. The Surfer 2 does have a better grip overall when comparing the two. It's not to say that the Surfer Next has bad grip, because I actually think it did a really, really good job overall. And both of them have fairly durable outsoles as well with that rubber compound. So both of them have good grip. I think On did a really, really good job in that regard, but it is actually noticeable to me that the Surfer 2 has better traction, despite having a similar traction pattern and same overall material there. So it's definitely something to consider if you live somewhere where there's going to be lots of rain or moisture that could cause the roads to be a little bit slick. Now, as far as my pick between these two shoes, it's pretty clearly the Cloudsurfer 2. And frankly, it's not really close to me, right? But what's funny is running shoes are going to be different. You're gonna have a different experience depending on who you are, what your stride's like, how much you weigh, how much power you put into the ground, all these different things. Because I've heard a lot of people say that the Surfer 2 was too soft. I've heard of them say that it's too firm. For me, it feels just right. Meanwhile, with the Cloudsurfer Next, I actually would have thought, given kind of the description of these two shoes, that I would prefer the Cloudsurfer Next because of the 6 millimeter heel to toe drop, which I'm a fan of. It just kind of fits the typical profile of a shoe that I would normally look at. But realistically, it was way too firm for me for the most part, to where, yeah, it worked for daily miles, but it's not a shoe that I found myself like constantly reaching for or getting super excited for miles in, versus I genuinely enjoyed the Surfer 2. I'm a little bummed that it's moving out of the rotation so I can continue to test some of the other shoes that I still need to get miles on, but something about the midsole there just felt right. It's a little bit of a Goldilocks shoe for me, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. So for me, Cloudsurfer 2, and honestly, there's a $10 difference between these shoes, and I do feel like the Surfer 2 is higher overall quality. So if I were going to go look at these two shoes, as always, I would say try them on, run in them on the treadmill, try and figure out which one is your preference, and then go with the one that fits your foot better, which feels better to you. If you don't want to go through the process of trying both of them and you just kind of want to risk it for the biscuit on one of them, then I would go Cloudsurfer 2, because the $10 difference is minimal when comparing these two shoes to me. So just some final thoughts. I was really impressed by the Cloudsurfer 2. I may have to go back and maybe try the Cloudsurfer 1 and just see how it was, because this is the first Cloudsurfer that I tried, not counting obviously the Cloudsurfer Next. And I'm a big fan of this shoe. It's probably going to be up there as far as daily trainers of the year for me. It's way too early for me to say it's #1, because I still have to decide how I'm going to categorize some other shoes that are either going to be considered like max cushion dailies or lightweight dailies, but it's definitely a contender. That is how much I liked the Cloudsurfer 2. And don't forget, the Cloudsurfer Max is still on the way this year, which is essentially just the renamed and next iteration of the Cloudeclipse. You have the Next as kind of your budget model, you have the Cloudsurfer as your standard model, and then you will have the Cloudsurfer Max as kind of that more max cushion version of the shoe. So really excited to see how I like those, excited to give them a shot because I also didn't test the first ones, but I'm very impressed with the Surfer 2. I very much enjoyed Miles in the shoe, and I'm looking forward to what's coming next from On. Now, if you appreciate you, please take a second, let me know in the comments what you enjoyed most about this video. And if you haven't already, please hit that like button, that subscribe button, and turn on notifications so you get notified every time I drop a new video. And with that, I'll wrap up with the question, as always, which is your preferred daily training line from On? The Cloudmonster series or the Cloudsurfer series? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks, everybody.